Lieutenant Kim Hannah rubbed her tired eyes as she monitored the deep space communications array. It was another quiet night shift at the Outer Rim monitoring station. 3 months into what felt like the most boring assignment in the Earth's defense. Force. The coffee had gone cold hours ago. The endless stream of cosmic background noise was putting her to sleep. Then something changed. A faint signal cut through the static, different from anything she had heard before. The transmission was weak, coming from somewhere incredibly far away, but it carried an unmistakable urgency. Hannah sat up straight, her training kicking in as she began isolating the signal from the background noise. "What the hell is this?" muttered, adjusting the frequency filters. The signal was definitely artificial, but it wasn't human. The patterns were too complex, too organized to be natural phenomena, yet completely unlike any Earth technology. Her heart began racing as she realized what she might be looking at. First contact. After decades of searching the stars, someone was finally trying to talk to them. With trembling fingers, Hannah fed the transmission into the xenolinguistic database. That scientist had been developing for years, hoping someday they might need it. The computer worked for several minutes, comparing patterns and structures against theoretical alien communication models. When the translation finally appeared on her screen, Hannah's blood turned to ice. The message was from something called the Valeri, according to the transmission. They were a peaceful civilization from the Kepler 442 system, over 400 light-years away. But they weren't sending greetings or offering friendship. They were screaming for help. Double quotes, please, ... Anyone who receives this message. Our world is dying, the translation read. The hegemony came 6 months ago. They said we must submit or face destruction. We offered them our knowledge, our resources, anything they wanted. It wasn't enough. Hannah's hands shook as she continued. Reading, the Valeri described massive ships appearing in their skies, landing armies that showed no mercy to civilians. Entire cities were being systematically destroyed. Those who survived were being herded into camps and used as slave labor. They're killing us for sport, the message continued. Our children, our elderly, our artists and scientists, they say we're weak. That weakness must be eliminated from the galaxy. We had no weapons, no military. We thought intelligence and compassion were enough. The transmission included horrific details that made Hannah feel sick. Mass executions in public squares, families torn apart, ancient libraries and museums burned to the ground. The Valeri weren't just being conquered. They were being systematically exterminated. Commander Park Daeho, you need to see this, right? Now, Hannah called out, her voice cracking with emotion. Park looked up from his reports, immediately noticing the panic in her voice. In 5 years of working together, he had never seen her like this. He quickly moved to her station, reading over her shoulder as she explained what she had found. Park's face darkened with each line he read. As a career military officer, he had seen plenty of violence, but this was something else entirely. This was genocide on an unimaginable scale, happening right now in a distant star system. "Are you certain this is real?" he asked quietly. "The signal patterns are too complex to fake," Hannah replied. "And look at this." She pulled up additional data the computer had decoded. They're including star charts, mathematical proofs, even biological data about their species. No one could fabricate something this detailed. Park studied the information, his jaw clenching tighter with each passing moment. The Valeri appeared to be an advanced civilization that had focused on science and art rather than warfare. They had achieved faster-than-light communication, but apparently had no military to speak of. They were completely defenseless against this hegemony. "Get this to Earth Command immediately," Park ordered. "Priority Alpha classification." And Hannah, "Not a word of this to anyone else until we get orders. This changes everything." Dr. Lee Sujin hadn't slept in 3 days. Her xenobiology lab at Earth Command had become a war room. Dozens of scientists and linguists working frantically to decode every piece of intercepted hegemony communication. Empty coffee cups and food containers littered the tables as her team pushed themselves to their limits. "Doctor, you need to see this," called out her assistant, Dr. Kim Woobin, his voice shaking. He had been analyzing the older hegemony transmissions. Trying to understand their history and motivations, Sujin walked over to his workstation, where multiple screens displayed translated messages spanning decades. What she saw made her stomach drop. The hegemony wasn't just occupying the Valeri homeworld. They were following a pattern that stretched back over a century. "Show me everything," she whispered. Wudash then pulled up a galactic map dotted with red markers. Each of these represents a civilization that the hegemony has encountered. "Look at the dates." He clicked through the markers one by one. The Kalani were destroyed 87 years ago. The Theran civilization, 73 years ago. The peaceful Morvac, 61 years ago. Sujin's hands trembled as she studied the data. Every single civilization had been described in hegemony records the same way: advanced, peaceful, and focused on science or art rather than warfare. None of them had posed any military threat to the hegemony. They're not expanding their territory, she realized with growing horror. They're cleaning house. Her team had discovered something that changed everything. The hegemony didn't want resources or strategic advantages. They were systematically hunting down and destroying every peaceful civilization they could find. Their own internal communications revealed their twisted philosophy. Weakness was a disease that needed to be eliminated from the galaxy. "Doctor, there's more," said another researcher, Dr. Park Ji-young. "Look at their biological studies of each species they've encountered." The files were disturbing beyond words. The hegemony had conducted detailed studies of every species they destroyed, documenting their culture, their scientific achievements, and their social structures. They kept these records like trophies, celebrating each extinction as a victory for their cause. "They're not just killing them," Sujin said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're erasing them completely, every trace of their existence." The pattern was clear and terrifying. The hegemony would study a civilization for months, learning everything about them. Then they would demand submission, knowing that peaceful species would try to negotiate. When diplomacy failed, they would launch a systematic campaign of destruction that left no survivors. 17 civilizations in 100 years, Wujin said, staring at the data. Billions of innocent lives, entire cultures, all gone. Sujin knew she had to report this to the Emergency Council immediately. She gathered her team's findings and headed to the secure briefing room where Earth's top military and political leaders were waiting. The room fell silent as she presented her findings. Admiral Cho Minho, a veteran of Earth's various conflicts, listened with growing rage as she explained the hegemony's true nature. "They're not just conquerors," she reported to the Emergency Council, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "They're exterminators. They hunt down peaceful civilizations specifically because they're peaceful." Admiral Cho slammed his fist on the table, making several people jump. The Valeri are brilliant scientists and artists. They've never threatened anyone, yet they're being slaughtered like animals. This isn't war, this is genocide. The parallels to humanity's own dark history hung heavy in the air. Everyone in the room knew about the Holocaust, the genocides in Rwanda and Cambodia, the systematic destruction of indigenous peoples throughout human history. They had sworn never again, but now they were watching it happen on a galactic scale. "Long do the Valeri have?" asked General Kim Tae-won. "Based on the pattern from other civilizations, maybe 6 months," Sujin replied. "The hegemony is thorough. They won't stop until every last Valeri is dead." This would be Earth's first major decision as a spacefaring civilization. The question wasn't whether they could help, but whether they would choose to act, Captain Yoon. Ji-hai sat in the gallery of the Global Defense Council chambers, watching history unfold before her eyes. The emergency session had been called within hours of Dr. Lee's horrifying report, and representatives from every nation on Earth had gathered. To make the most important decision in human history, the debate had been intense, but surprisingly brief. Some council members worried about humanity's inexperience with interstellar warfare. Others questioned whether Earth had the right to interfere in alien conflicts. But as the evidence of hegemony atrocities was presented, one by one, even the most cautious voices fell silent. "We've seen this before," said the representative from Germany, her voice heavy with emotion. "My grandparents lived through the Holocaust. They told me stories that gave me nightmares as a child. We swore never again, but here we are, watching it happen on a scale we never imagined. The representative from Rwanda nodded grimly. The world stood by while my people were slaughtered. International leaders talked about non-interference while machetes fell and rivers ran red with blood. We cannot make that same mistake again. Captain Yoon felt a chill run down her spine. She had joined the Earth Defense Force 5 years ago, back when their biggest concern was asteroid mining disputes and orbital traffic control. Now they were talking about launching humanity's first interstellar war. President Kim Tae-sung stood at the podium, his face grave as he addressed the assembly. Friends, we face a choice that will define us as a species. We can hide behind our own borders, hoping the hegemony never finds us, or we can stand up for what's right. The president's voice grew stronger as he continued. The Valeri sent their message not just to Earth, but to anyone who might hear it. They're crying out for help in their final moments, and we may be the only ones listening. We cannot stand by while innocents are murdered. If we do nothing now, we become complicit in genocide. The vote was called immediately. One by one, representatives from every nation raised their hands in favor of military intervention. The final tally was unanimous. 195 votes in favor, 0 against. 0 abstentions. Captain Yoon felt tears in her eyes as she watched the historic moment. Humanity had just voted to go to war for a species they had never met, in a star system they had never visited, against an enemy they barely understood. Within hours, the mobilization began. Admiral Cho Min-ho was placed in command of the largest military operation in human history. Shipyards across the solar system went into overdrive, retrofitting civilian vessels for combat, and rushing the completion of military ships still. Under construction, the response from Earth's population was overwhelming. Volunteers flooded recruitment, centers desperate to join the mission. Factory workers pulled double shifts to produce weapons and supplies. Scientists worked around the clock to develop new technologies that might give humanity an edge against the technologically superior hegemony. "We're really doing this?" whispered Lieutenant Commander Park Hyun-soo, Yoon's second in command. As they watched the massive fleet taking shape in Earth's orbit, over 200 vessels of every type imaginable had been assembled. Massive battleships, bristling with kinetic weapons, fast attack cruisers equipped with experimental energy cannons, and countless support ships carrying marines, medical supplies, and humanitarian aid for the Valeri survivors. The flagship UES Retribution, a brand new dreadnought that had been rushed to completion, would lead the fleet under Admiral Cho's command. It was the most advanced warship humanity had ever built, incorporating technology that had been purely theoretical just months earlier. Captain Yoon received her orders the next morning. She would command the UES Defiance, a heavy cruiser assigned to the fleet's vanguard. As she read the mission briefing, she realized her life was about to change forever. They were heading into the unknown, against impossible odds, to save a species that most humans couldn't even pronounce, but somehow it felt right. This was humanity's moment to prove what they stood for. The 3-month journey to Kepler 442 felt like the longest voyage in human history. Captain Yoon Ji-hai walked through the corridors of the UES Defiance, watching her crew prepare for what might be their final mission. The ship hummed with nervous energy as 200 vessels traveled through the void, carrying humanity's hopes and fears toward a distant star system. Communications officer Nam Suho had barely left his station since they departed Earth. His job was to monitor hegemony transmissions and learn everything possible about their enemy before the fleet arrived. What he discovered during those long months painted a disturbing picture of their opponents. "Admiral, you need to hear this," Nam reported during one of the daily briefings. He played back a translated hegemony transmission that had been intercepted. Just hours earlier, the alien voices were discussing the human fleet with casual amusement. They called humanity an infant species that had apparently achieved faster-than-light travel only recently. To them, the approaching Earth ships were nothing more than an interesting curiosity.
Ow.
"They're not even concerned about us," Nam said, his voice tight with frustration. "They're treating our entire fleet like a joke. One of their commanders said we're probably bringing them gifts and hoping to negotiate. Admiral Cho Minho listened to the recordings with growing anger. The hegemony's arrogance was breathtaking. They had detected the human fleet weeks ago, but showed no signs of military preparation. Instead, they were placing bets on how quickly they could destroy the Earth's ships. "What else have you learned about them?" the Admiral asked. Nam pulled up his analysis files. "They're definitely more advanced than us in some areas. Their ships are larger, their energy weapons are more powerful, and they have shielding technology we don't fully understand. But they're also overconfident. They've been winning so easily for so long that they can't imagine anyone putting up real resistance." Captain Yoon reviewed the intelligence reports with her senior staff. The hegemony had been steamrolling peaceful civilizations for over a century, never encountering serious military opposition. Every species they had destroyed had tried to negotiate or surrender rather than fight back. "They have no idea what they're dealing with," she told her weapons officer, Lieutenant Kim Dongwoo. "They've never faced an opponent that actually wanted to fight." The journey gave the human fleet time to prepare in ways the hegemony couldn't imagine. While the aliens laughed and made jokes, human crews drilled constantly. They practiced combat maneuvers, tested their weapons systems, and studied every scrap of intelligence about their enemy. Captain Yoon found herself checking her weapons systems obsessively. The Defiance carried humanity's most advanced kinetic weapons, along with experimental energy cannons that had never been tested in real combat. Every day, she ran diagnostic checks and combat simulations, preparing for the battle that would determine the fate of two species. "Captain, you need to see this," Nam called out during the final week of their journey. He had intercepted a particularly disturbing transmission from the Valeri homeworld. The message described the destruction of another major city. The hegemony was systematically working through the Valeri population centers, destroying everything. In their path, millions of innocent aliens had died while the human fleet crawled through space at maximum speed. "They're not even trying to hide what they're doing," Nam said, his voice shaking with rage. "They're broadcasting their progress like it's entertainment." The hegemony commanders were competing to see who could eliminate the most Valeri in the shortest time, returning genocide into a game, completely unaware that their actions were being monitored by an increasingly angry human fleet. "Let them laugh," Captain Yoon said quietly, her hands clenched into fists. "They think we're just another peaceful species coming to beg for mercy. They have no idea that humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years." The fleet continued its approach, maintaining radio silence while the hegemony continued their systematic destruction. The aliens had no idea that the approaching storm would change everything. The moment of truth arrived with a brilliant flash of light as the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. After 3 months of traveling through the void, 200 Earth vessels suddenly materialized in normal space, their engines glowing like new stars against the darkness. Sensor operator Jung Manesio felt her heart racing as her screens lit up with contact readings. What she saw made her blood run cold. The Valeri homeworld, a beautiful blue-green planet that should have been teeming with life, was surrounded by massive alien structures that looked like mechanical vultures circling their prey. "Admiral, I'm reading 12 major battle stations in orbit around the planet," she reported, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her stomach. "Each one is at least twice the size of our largest ships. They're harvesting something." From the surface, Admiral Cho Min-ho studied the tactical display with grim determination. The hegemony had turned the entire star system into a military stronghold. Massive ships patrolled the outer planets, while smaller vessels moved between the orbital stations like worker ants serving their queen. "Are there any signs of Valeri resistance?" he asked. Jung Manesio shook her head sadly. "Nothing, sir. Detecting some population centers on the surface, but they're much smaller than they should be based on our original intelligence. Most of the planet appears to be ... empty." The implications were horrifying. The hegemony had been systematically destroying Valeri cities for months, while the human fleet crawled through space. Millions of innocent beings had died while Earth's children raced to save them. Admiral Cho made a decision that would echo through history. He ordered all ships to maintain their positions at the system's edge, then opened a direct communication channel to the hegemony forces. His message was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every alien vessel would receive it clearly. "This is Admiral Cho Minho of the Earth Defense Force," he began, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's determination. "You are occupying the sovereign territory of the Valeri people and committing acts of genocide against a peaceful civilization. Release the Valeri and withdraw immediately. This is your only warning." The response came back within minutes, and it was everything the humans had expected. Alien voices filled with arrogant laughter echoed across the communication channels. The hegemony commanders seemed genuinely amused by the human ultimatum. "Infant species," one of them said in heavily accented but understandable English. "Travel so far to die for strangers, how... quaint. We wondered when you would arrive. Our sensors detected your primitive ships weeks ago." Another voice joined the conversation, dripping with contempt. "You should have stayed in your own system, children. The Valeri are nearly extinct now.
Ow.
Soon there will be nothing left to save." The hegemony commander's tone turned cold and threatening. "Turn around and go home. Forget about this system. Forget about the Valeri. If you leave now, we might let your species live a little longer." Captain Yoon Ji-hai listened to the exchange from her bridge aboard the UES Defiance. Her crew stood at their stations, faces grim with determination. They had traveled across the galaxy to face this moment, and the enemy's arrogance only strengthened their resolve. "They're not taking us seriously," her tactical officer reported. "Sir, they're actually laughing at us." The insult stung, but Yoon knew it was exactly what they needed. The hegemony's overconfidence would be their downfall. These aliens had spent so long bullying peaceful civilizations that they couldn't recognize a real threat when it appeared. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the human fleet. The hegemony forces were moving. Massive ships emerged from behind the planet's moons, while the orbital battle stations began rotating to face the human position. "Sir," Captain Yoon reported grimly to Admiral Cho, "they're bringing everything. They have, I count, over 300 enemy vessels moving to intercept us." Admiral Cho watched the enemy fleet deploy with cold satisfaction. The hegemony was doing exactly what he had hoped they would do. They were so confident in their superiority that they were committing their entire force to crush what they saw as an insignificant threat. "Good," he replied, his voice carrying a hint of anticipation. "Let them come." The stage was set for humanity's first interstellar war. The battle that would change galactic history began not with a roar, but with silence. The massive hegemony fleet advanced toward the human position, their commanders still chuckling about the easy victory they expected. What they didn't know was that the Earth ships had already vanished from their sensors. Weapons. Officer Ko Dong-min sat at his station aboard the UES Defiance, watching his targeting computer track enemy vessels that had no idea they were being hunted. The stealth technology that Earth scientists had developed was humanity's greatest secret weapon. It was about to prove its worth in the most important battle of their lives. "Ghost protocols are active across the fleet," he reported to Captain Yoon. "All ships are invisible to their sensors. The enemy has no idea where we are." The hegemony fleet continued its confident advance, their massive battleships moving in loose formation. They were clearly expecting the human ships to either flee or attempt some desperate frontal assault. Instead, they were sailing blind into the most sophisticated trap in military history. "Target their command ship first, Captain," Yoon ordered. "Let's see how they handle losing their leader." Kadongmin's fingers moved across his console with practiced precision. The kinetic kill vehicles were humanity's answer to the hegemony's superior energy shields. Instead of fancy lasers or plasma cannons, these were simple chunks of dense metal accelerated to incredible speeds. Physics would do the rest. "Firing kinetic kill vehicles," he announced calmly, his voice betraying none of the excitement he felt inside. The projectiles streaked through space at nearly the speed of light, invisible to both sensors and the naked eye. The Hegemony command ship was still broadcasting taunts to the seemingly empty void when the first impact struck its hull. The explosion was spectacular. The massive alien vessel, easily 3 times the size of any human ship, buckled and twisted as kinetic energy tore through its armor like paper. Secondary explosions rippled along its length as critical systems failed one by one. Direct hit on the command ship, Ko Dongmin reported with satisfaction. She's breaking up. Across the human fleet, similar scenes played out as ghost ships. Struck without warning, the Hegemony's numerical advantage meant nothing when they couldn't see their enemies. Their powerful weapons were useless against targets they couldn't locate. Captain, Yoon watched the tactical display with growing excitement. The human fleet was moving like a pack of wolves, using coordination and tactics that the Hegemony had never encountered. While the aliens flew in straight lines and predictable patterns, the Earth ships weaved through space in complex formations that maximized their firepower while minimizing their exposure. "Ma'am, the enemy is trying to retreat," reported her tactical officer. "They're falling back toward the planet." "Don't let them," Yoon replied coldly. "They wanted to fight. Now they get to finish what they started." The human ships pursued their fleeing enemies with relentless efficiency. Centuries of naval warfare had taught humanity how to hunt in groups, how to coordinate attacks, and how to exploit enemy weaknesses. These lessons, learned in Earth's oceans, now proved devastatingly effective in the vacuum of space. Lieutenant Commander Park Hyensu watched from the bridge of the UES Vengeance as another Hegemony battleship died. In a brilliant flash of light, the aliens were trying to reform their battle line, but it was too late. The human fleet had scattered their formation and was now picking them off one by one. "They're not used to this," he observed. "They've been fighting peaceful civilizations for so long that they forgot how to handle real opposition." The Hegemony's larger vessels, which had seemed so intimidating when the battle began, now proved to be their weakness. They were slow and cumbersome, designed for bombarding helpless planets rather than fighting agile opponents. The human ships danced around them like fighters boxing a giant, landing devastating blows while staying out of reach. Explosions continued to light up the darkness as enemy ships died one by one. The hunters had become the hunted, and humanity was showing no mercy to those who had shown none to the Valeri. While the space battle raged above, Marine Commander Imdajin prepared for the most difficult mission of her career. The assault shuttles, carrying her Marines, screamed through the atmosphere of the Valeri homeworld, air hulls glowing red-hot from atmospheric entry. Through the viewport, she could see the scars of occupation covering the planet's surface, like infected wounds. 2 minutes to landing zone, the pilot announced over the comm system. The Jinn looked at her troops, seeing the same grim determination in their eyes that she felt in her own heart. These were hardened soldiers who had volunteered for humanity's most dangerous mission. They knew they might not return home, but they also knew that innocent beings were suffering below. "Remember why we're here," she told her Marines as they prepared for combat. "The Valeri never hurt anyone. They were scientists, artists, teachers. They deserved better than this." The first landing zone was what used to be Valara's capital city. According to intelligence reports, it had once housed over 10 million inhabitants. Now, as the shuttles touched down, the Jin saw only ruins and smoke rising from the devastation. Sergeant Kim Tae-jin was the first to report contact with the enemy. His squad had entered what appeared to be a residential district, expecting to find Hegemony patrols. Instead, they found something much worse. "Commander, you need to see this." His voice crackled over the radio. Barely controlled emotion bleeding through his professional tone, the Jin and her command team rushed to the location. What they found made her seasoned soldiers stop in there. Tracks, several of them removing their helmets to vomit. The Hegemony had turned the city's central plaza into a mass grave. Thousands of Valeri bodies were stacked like cordwood, their delicate features frozen in expressions of terror and pain. "They were civilians," whispered Corporal Lee Minyoung, kneeling beside a small form that was clearly a child. "Look at their hands. These were artists, not soldiers. They had no weapons." The horror only deepened as the Marines spread through the city. They found slave camps where surviving Valeri were forced to work in conditions that would have killed most humans. They discovered laboratories where hegemony scientists had conducted experiments on living subjects, treating the peaceful aliens like test animals. "Commander, we've got movement in Sector 7, reported Lieutenant Park Dong-han. Hegemony. Patrol. 12 contacts. The Jinn felt something cold and terrible settle in her chest. The evidence of atrocities was everywhere around them, and now they were face to face with the creatures responsible. Rules of engagement? Asked Sergeant Kim Dojin. Looked around at the devastation, at the bodies of innocent beings who had died screaming for mercy that never came. Her voice was steady when she replied, but her eyes burned with righteous fury. "No prisoners," she ordered grimly. "Showed them the same mercy they showed the Valeri." The word spread through the marine companies like wildfire. Every squad that entered the ruined cities found new evidence of hegemony brutality. They found schools that had been turned into execution sites. They found hospitals where patients had been murdered in their beds. They found nurseries where the smallest victims lay silent forever. The hegemony. Occupation forces quickly learned that they were facing something they had never encountered before. The peaceful species they had terrorized for a century had always begged for mercy, had always tried to negotiate even as they died. These humans fought like demons possessed, showing no quarter and accepting no surrender. Private Yoon Soo-jin found herself face to face with a hegemony soldier in the ruins of what had been a library. The alien raised his weapon, but she was faster. As he fell, she saw scattered around them the burned remains of books and artwork that had taken centuries to create. "This was their culture," she whispered, touching the ashes of a destroyed manuscript. "They burned it all just because they could." The Marines fought with a ferocity that terrified even their alien enemies. Every atrocity they witnessed fueled their anger, transforming professional soldiers into avenging angels. The liberation of each city became a reckoning for the occupiers' crimes. And the hegemony forces found themselves facing an enemy that fought like the wrath of an angry god. Tide of battle had turned dramatically in humanity's favor when the hegemony's main fleet finally arrived. Fleet Admiral Baek Hyun-woo watched from the bridge of the USS Retribution as hundreds of massive alien vessels dropped out of hyperspace, their hulls gleaming like metal sharks in the starlight. "Sir, we're reading over 400 enemy ships," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Ogu. "They're 3 times our size and heavily armed. This is everything the hegemony has in this sector." Baek studied the tactical display with calm satisfaction. The enemy reinforcements had arrived exactly when he had hoped they would. The hegemony commanders were so confident in their numerical superiority that they had committed their entire reserve fleet to crush what they still believed was a minor threat. "Perfect," he said quietly. "They're doing exactly what we wanted them to do." The arriving hegemony fleet moved with arrogant confidence, their commanders broadcasting taunts to the human forces. They had brought enough firepower to destroy entire star systems, and they were certain that these primitive humans would finally understand their place in the galactic order. "Attention, Earth vessels," came the alien transmission, dripping with contempt. "You have fought bravely for insects, but now you face the true might of the hegemony. Surrender now, and we will grant you a quick death." Admiral Cho Min-ho responded with icy calm. "Counter-proposal. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawing from this system before we demonstrate why humans became the dominant species on a planet full of predators." The alien laughter that followed was cut short by Baek's next command. "All ships, execute." Protocol 7. Ordered across the fleet-wide communication channel. What happened next had been planned for months in the deepest levels of Earth's military command. The antimatter weapons that humanity had developed were their most closely guarded secret, representing the absolute pinnacle of human destructive capability. They had been saving them for this exact moment. The weapons appeared on sensors as small, innocent-looking projectiles launched from hidden positions throughout the human fleet. The hegemony commanders barely had time to register their existence before they reached their targets. The first antimatter warhead struck the hegemony flagship dead center. The explosion was unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed in space. Combat. Matter and antimatter annihilated each other in a reaction that released more energy than a small star. creating a brilliant flash that temporarily blinded sensors throughout the system. When the light faded, the massive alien battleship was simply gone. Not destroyed, not damaged, but completely erased from existence. Where a kilometer-long vessel had been seconds before, there was now only empty space and expanding debris. Direct hit on the flagship, reported Weapons Officer Ko Dongmin, his voice filled with awe. Complete destruction confirmed. The antimatter bombardment continued for precisely 30 seconds, each warhead finding its target with devastating accuracy. The hegemony's command ships, their most powerful battleships, and their mobile battle stations were obliterated in brilliant flashes of annihilation. The alien fleet, which had seemed so overwhelming just moments before, was suddenly headless and confused. Without their command structure, the remaining ships milled about in panic, their crews unable to coordinate any meaningful response. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the surviving hegemony forces," reported communications. Officer Nam Suho. It's a surrender request." The voice that came through the speakers was completely different from the arrogant taunts they had been hearing. This alien commander spoke with the desperate fear of someone who had just witnessed the impossible. "Earth Fleet, this is Subcommander Vex of the Hegemony 3rd Battle Group. We request terms for surrender. Please respond." Admiral Cho let the silence stretch for long moments before responding. When he finally spoke, his voice was as cold as the vacuum of space. "Your terms?" he asked, as if he hadn't just obliterated the most powerful fleet in this sector of the galaxy. "We will withdraw from this system immediately," the alien voice replied, trembling with fear. "We will not return. We will leave the remaining Valeri in peace." "Please, we have families. We have not good enough," Cho interrupted. "Complete withdrawal from all occupied territories. Full reparations to any surviving species you have attacked, and submission to human monitoring to ensure compliance. These terms are non-negotiable." The response came quickly. "Agreed. All terms accepted. Please, no more antimatter weapons." Humanity had won its first interstellar war, and the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the battle that shook the galaxy, Dr. Oyunbai stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed orbital station above the Valeri homeworld. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see the planet slowly healing from the wounds of occupation. Where once there had been smoking ruins and mass graves, new cities were rising from the ashes. The Valeri had proven to be remarkable in their resilience. Despite losing over 60% of their population to hegemony genocide, the survivors had thrown themselves into rebuilding with an energy that amazed their human protectors. Their advanced scientific knowledge combined with human engineering and determination was creating something beautiful from the devastation. "Doctor, the morning reports are ready," said her assistant, Dr. Kong Minho, as he approached with a tablet full of reconstruction data. The numbers told an incredible story. Valeri cities that had been reduced to rubble just months ago were now bustling with activity. Grateful aliens had shared their most advanced technologies with humanity, including medical techniques that could extend human lifespans and energy systems that made faster than light travel far more efficient. "Look." At this, Yunbai said, pointing to the surface below. 6 months ago, that area was nothing but craters and mass graves. Now it's a thriving research complex where Valeri and human scientists work side by side. The alliance between the two species had grown stronger every day. The Valeri, despite their pacifist nature, had provided crucial intelligence about other civilizations that might need help. They had detailed maps of hegemony-controlled space and knew species were still fighting for survival, but the real change was happening across the galaxy. Word of humanity's intervention had spread like wildfire through secret communication networks that connected oppressed civilizations throughout known space. The message was always the same. Humans had come from nowhere to save a species they had never met. And they had made the hegemony surrender unconditionally. Captain Song Jamin reviewed the latest intelligence reports from his command center. Aboard the newly established Galactic Liberation Command headquarters, the massive space station, built jointly by human and Valeri engineers, served as the nerve center for humanity's expanding role as galactic peacekeepers. "Sir, we're receiving another distress signal," reported Communications Officer Kim Honnell. "This one's from the Zintari system. They're reporting hegemony raids on their outer colonies." Song nodded grimly. This was the 14th distress call they had received this month. Species across the galaxy were finally finding the courage to ask for help. Knowing that someone might actually answer, the transformation had been remarkable. Aggressive empires that had spent centuries terrorizing weaker civilizations were suddenly reassessing their expansion plans. The hegemony's humiliating defeat had sent shockwaves through the galactic community, proving that even the most powerful militaries could be brought down by determination and superior tactics. "Prepare a response fleet," Song ordered. "Standard. Liberation package. 2 battle groups, Marine Expeditionary Force, and humanitarian supplies." His orders would have seemed impossible just a year ago. Humanity had gone from a single planet species to the galaxy's primary peacekeeping force in less than 12 months. Earth's shipyards were working around the clock to build new vessels, while recruitment centers struggled to process the flood of volunteers wanting to join the Liberation Command. The Valeria taught humanity about dozens of species that were suffering under various forms of oppression. Some were enslaved by resource-hungry empires. Others were being slowly exterminated by fanatic religious movements. And many were simply trapped under the boots of militaristic governments that saw weakness as a crime. The Thakari sent another message of gratitude, Hanwell reported. "They're naming their new capital city after Admiral Cho." Song smiled at that. 3 weeks ago, they had liberated the Thakari homeworld from a brutal occupation that had lasted 15 years. The grateful aliens had wept when human Marines arrived, unable to believe that someone had finally come to help them. Earth's message to the galaxy was crystal clear. The age of unchecked alien tyranny was over. Humanity had become the guardians. The galaxy never knew it needed, and they were just getting started.